Thank you, Mark. Thanks, Valerie. Thank you to our anonymous donor. And I'm really grateful to be here again with all of you today, and grateful as well to Adi, who's going to be managing our tech. So today's session is called Remiza de Chochmeta, which literally means a hint or a nod to wisdom. It's an Aramaic phrase that comes from our tradition, from our mystical tradition. And really what we're going to be working on today is cultivating discernment. Some people asked yesterday, how do I know if the Torah that I'm receiving is just an ego projection, right? As opposed to something coming from a higher transcendent source that can really illuminate some deeper facet of my life and of my spiritual growth. So we're going to be working on that question today and turning into that question directly. I just want to say by way of review that on Monday we explored awareness or our consciousness as the source of our inner Torah and cultivated our capacity to turn inward toward that part of us. On Tuesday, we illuminated the nature of awareness, our inner teacher, our inner source of Torah, as that transcendent part of us that is innately clear and loving. And then yesterday, we worked on developing a kind of receptivity by dropping a question or a request into that pool of awareness and then quietly paying close attention, allowing whatever arises to arise and be known, and looking for the wisdom that may present itself in response. So again, today we're going to be working on cultivating and developing greater discernment and kind of sifting or clarifying how we might be able to have a deeper sense of clarity about whether what we're experiencing right now is Torah or something else. And we're going to be opening up two new aspects or dimensions of practice. The first is around expanding our playing field. So up until now, we've really been exploring how to cultivate and discern and listen for the Torah that is arising within us, in our own being. Right? But as we'll see, according to our tradition, the whole world, the whole universe is actually brimming with Torah. So how can we begin to open up the field a little bit so that we're not just kind of in our own kind of narrow bubble, but actually relating to and engaging with the whole world as brimming with wisdom and divine intelligence. And then number two, really coming at this question of discernment that I mentioned before. So Adi, if I could ask you to pull up the source sheet, that would be really helpful. Thanks so much for doing that. Wonderful. We're going to take a look here at a 20th century Hasidic teacher, Rabbi Shalom Noach Berezovsky. He lived in Mea Sha'arim, an ultra-Orthodox neighborhood in Jerusalem. But his teachings are very clear and incisive. And he passed away in 2000. He's commenting here on Exodus 19:5, which appears in a litany of instructions to Moses that Moses is to relate to the Israelites before receiving the Torah at Sinai, immediately before receiving the Torah at Sinai. And many of us are familiar with one of these instructions, which is that you all, right, all of you Israelites are going to be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. And that promise is conditional in this litany upon verse 5, which states, Ve'ata im shamoa tishme'u b'koli. Right? And now, if you will listen to my voice, right, which is traditionally understood as, if you will obey my commandments, then you will be a kingdom of priests and a holy nation. So our teacher, Rabbi Shalom Noach Berezovsky, actually takes it in a different direction that's very relevant to our practice this week of listening for Torah from a transcendent source. This is the significance, he says, that here God says, if you will listen to my voice and not to my commandments, as in several other places in the Torah, right? There's plenty of places in the Torah where the text states, God said to Moses, the people need to follow this commandment or that commandment or listen to my commandments. But here it's specifically to my voice, to my voice. Listen to my voice, says our teacher. Incline your hearts to hear what it is that God wants of you. To hear in everything, the inner intention that is concealed in the voice of God, what it is that God desires. This is the first element of the nature of a Jew, to listen to the voice of God, to investigate in whatever comes our way. What does God want of me? What does Yud He Vav He, your God, ask of you? We are invited to listen always for the voice of God speaking directly to us. So says Rabbi Shalom Noach Berezovsky, do you want to know what Judaism is all about? Do you know what it means to be a Jew? It means to be a person who inclines their inner ear or inner eye, as it were, right, to the task of listening deeply to the voice of God, instructing us on the path and leading us onward toward a life of sacred purpose and connection with the divine. And to illustrate what he means here, Rabbi Berezovsky tells the following story about Rabbi Moshe Leib of Sasov, one of the great Polish Hasidic, revered Hasidic teachers, who relayed that he was once asked by a wagon driver to pick up something that had fallen from the wagon. And when Rabbi Moshe Leib responded that he wasn't able, the driver replied, "You are able, you just don't want to." Now, he could have kind of hardened up and gotten defensive, and said, "Who is this guy anyway, right? He's working for me. How come he's giving me lip here?" But in that moment, Rabbi Moshe Leib heard the word of God directed to him. You are able, you just don't want to. Right? You can serve me, right? You can let go of this or that preoccupation, whatever the case may be, right? That desire, that aversion, that habit, you just don't want to. And so here we find an example of a person inclining their ear, as it were, to listen for the voice of God, even in an offhand comment made by a wagon driver who they've hired to take them from place A to place B. So what we're seeing here is that this is kind of a disposition to life, right? A disposition to how we engage with the world, right? The world isn't just something from which we take what we want for our own comfort. It's not just something, the product of which we consume, right? But it's actually brimming with wisdom to guide us in our spiritual work, and even sometimes to point out the ways in which we may have gone off course so that we can redirect. Adi, if we could scroll down just a little bit to the next page, that would be wonderful. We can go to the English here. We're going to look quickly at Rabbi Nachman of Breslov, the great founder of the Breslov Hasidic dynasty, who teaches us that for us Jews must always focus on the inner intelligence, the seichel that lies within every object or event, and bind ourselves to the wisdom and inner intelligence that is to be found in each thing. So, according to the Hasidic way of mapping reality, right, everything is an unfolding of pure divinity. The core teaching of the Baal Shem Tov is there's only God and nothing but God, right? Everything is God and there's nothing but God. And remember, we said that Torah in this conception is synonymous with divinity, right? It's an outflow of the divine field of pure consciousness and love that is God. And says Rabbi Nachman, that being the case, then everything contains divinity in it. right? And contains that divine intelligence within it. And we can train ourselves. We can train ourselves to focus on that inner intelligence that is to be found in every single dimension of reality, in every single thing, in every single object, in every single person, in every single event. Why? This, so that the intelligence within each thing may illuminate for us how to draw closer to God through that object or event. That's the core teaching. Reality is brimming with hints, allusions, suggestions, pointers for how we might draw closer to divinity. For this inner intelligence is a great light that shines for us in all of our ways, as is written, a person's wisdom causes her countenance to shine. It's not just that it teaches us how to come close to God, right? It illuminates for us how to proceed through life in a way that actually allows us to be happier, more buoyant, more effervescent, right? More carefree, and to feel ourselves held in the loving embrace of a transcendent presence and a kind of fullness of being. So we might say, well, this is great, but how do we do it? And Rose Mary Doherty, who was a spiritual director for over 30 years in the Catholic tradition, talks about how to cultivate a kind of discernment that allows us to actually begin to intuit this kind of inner intelligence that's trying to pull us back to our own divine nature and to divinity itself. She talks about discernment as a habit of the heart, a D. If you wouldn't mind scrolling down just a little bit. Discernment is primarily a habit. It's not something we're necessarily born with. We need to cultivate it, right? Or maybe we are born with it, but it's not fully developed. It's a way of being that, while initially cultivated by our skillful means, ultimately takes us beyond them. Sometimes the habit of discernment invites specific acts, times of actively and consciously bringing particular decisions into prayer or prayerful reflection, as we did yesterday. These acts of discernment may include sorting through experiences and information related to the decisions so that we might see freshly in the moment and choose that which best fits our being. But decision-making is only one facet of discernment. It can, in fact, be the need to make a decision that becomes the catalyst for cultivating of a discerning heart that serves us in all of life. So in this conception, there's actually no separation between our meditation life and our lived everyday lives. Everything can become the gateway into greater discernment if we cultivate this way of being in our lives. She goes on to say, discernment is concerned with the discrimination of interior movements. This is really key here. Those attractions or nudgings of the heart that evoke a response or move us toward a particular action. This discrimination involves observing those interior movements that ignite the flame of our desire for God and encourage our own authenticity, and those that appear to direct our attention and aspiration away from God and our true selves. The purpose of this discrimination would be to facilitate a growing self-knowledge that frees us to move in harmony with those movements that draw us toward God. Such discrimination could also provide the alertness we need to avoid being swept away by those interior nudges that move us away from God and from our true selves. An idea, if we could go just one line more, that would be really helpful. The key to our discrimination is simple awareness of inner stirrings without analysis. Simple awareness of inner stirrings without analysis. At best, we can say that these stirrings seem to be leading to or inviting. Generally, only with a great deal of hindsight can we know where something has been leading. Right? So in the moment, we simply bring bare attention, right, pure awareness into whatever is happening here and now, to the movement or the inner stirrings of the body, the heart, the mind, and ultimately the world, right? And wisdom begins to arise quite intuitively and naturally. But even so, we may not know where things may lead, even though we may get a clear transmission, right, or a clear pointer on the path. And that's why I love this language of Remiza de Chochmeta, right? A hint that's pointing us toward wisdom. It may not be so super duper clear, but it points in a direction. It points in a direction, right? It inclines us to move forward in a certain way that we intuit to be a path that will ultimately lead us back to our true nature and to a state of harmony with the divine field of pure consciousness and love that is flowing into us in each moment. So we need to cultivate some humility, and we need to pay attention to what ultimately brings us closer to our divine nature and to God, as peace, as love, as wholeness. And we also need to pay attention to what moves us toward greater authenticity, toward our true nature, toward what we know deep down already to be true, but may forget or overlook or become distracted from paying attention to. There's this beautiful teaching in our tradition about someone being in a state where toho kivaro, where their internal being, their innermost being matches their external reality, how they show up externally, how they behave, how they think, how they act, how they speak. That's what we're going for here, right? And if whatever insight we receive in any way distorts what we know to be true at the deepest level and causes us to feel like we're somehow splintered or conflicted within ourselves, it's likely that what's going on is some form of ego grasping or delusion rather than something that's true. So we're going to practice now. I want to invite you to take your seat, and we can stop the screen share. And we're going to be just bringing simple awareness to the stirrings and movements of the inner life. There's no need here for commentary. There's no need for labels. There's no need for analysis. Relax into a dignified and supple posture. The body doesn't need to be doing any work here. Awareness will do all the work for us. So you can relax and let go. There's nothing to achieve. There's not even anything to do. Because awareness knows our experience here and now spontaneously and effortlessly. It doesn't need to resort to thoughts or conceptions or structures. So allow your awareness to become flush with the movement of your inner experience. That could be the movement of the breath. If that feels like a safe home base for you, that affords some stability. Some calm. Could be the movement of sound. If that feels more accessible and nourishing. Could be the movement of sensation at the point of contact between your body and its support. And we bring bare attention. We allow our awareness to become flush with the movement of sensation in the body. And rather than a kind of neutral awareness, we bring a kind of warm curiosity, inclining our inner ear, as it were, to listen for any remazim, any hints, intimations, ripples or echoes of wisdom that may be arising out of these movements and stirrings of the inner life. What is this breath trying to teach me about how to return to my true nature, how to live a life that is aligned and attuned to a higher consciousness, to a field of limitless love? If any emotions or thoughts arise and you find yourself swimming in that sea, again, you can bring the same bare attention to thoughts, feelings, emotions, and inclining your inner ear, as it were, to whatever Torah may be present there. Perhaps an aching heart is trying to instruct you in the art of compassion. Perhaps a wild mind is showing you where you've been placing your attention and what you've been investing your energy and effort into, and thus inviting you to come back and reprioritize. We're not trying to make these lessons arise. We're not trying to squeeze juice out of an orange. We're really just allowing everything to be as it is. Of course, if you'd like, you can drop a question into this pool of awareness. But rather than dropping a question so that we can force an answer to arise, the question simply invites our curious, loving attention to what may then arise moment by moment by moment as a teaching. The question supports us to become people who listen for the voice, the intimations, the hints. And of course, you're welcome to stay like this with your eyes closed or with your eyes slightly open. Or alternatively, if you like and you're sitting somewhere near a window, you can look outside and look for the seichel, the innate intelligence of the natural world around you. Again, the still point of awareness allows us to discern movement. The ego wants to move away from God, but the soul always wants to return. And if we look deeply into the natural world, we might find pointers guiding us toward wisdom, teaching us how to return, how to hearken to and listen to the soul's deepest desire. So we'll close with a teaching from Sherry Carter Scott in a piece called The Rules for Being Human. Number one, you will learn lessons. You are enrolled in a full-time school called life. Each day in this school, you will have the opportunity to learn lessons. You may like the lessons or hate them, but the transcendent whole of which you are a part has designed them as part of your curriculum. Number two, there are no mistakes, only lessons. Growth is a process of experimentation, a series of trials, errors, and occasional victories. The failed experiments are as much a part of the process as the experiments that worked. Number 3, a lesson is repeated until learned. Lessons will be repeated to you in various forms until you have learned them. When you have learned them, you can go on to the next lesson. And number 4, learning lessons does not end. There is no part of life that does not contain lessons. If you are alive, there is a lesson to be learned.
Thank you, Sam. Thanks so much. It's beautiful practice and teaching. And friends, as always, we seal that practice with Kaddish Yatom, the mourner's Kaddish, extending our love and support to those in mourning and inviting you, if you are holding someone in your heart today, to share their name or names in the chat box, and inviting you to rise in body and spirit to join me with the words of Kaddish. Yitgadal, Yitkadash, Shemei Rabbah,
Amen.
Yama, Dibra, Kirute, Yamlich Malchite, Kaye Kom, Yame Kom, Kaye V'kol Beit Yisrael, Gala, Vizman Karim, Vimru, Amen.
Amen.
Hey Shmei Rabbah Barak, Olam Olam Olam, Yishtabach V'Yitba'ar V'Yitramam V'Yitnaseh, Ar V'Yitzadeh V'Yitzadeh Elan Mikol Amiran B'Ama Amen. Hey Shlama Rabba Min Shemaya Aleinu Oseh Shalom Yiravam Uyaseh Shalom Leinu Yisrael Yalko Yoshvei Israel.
Amen.
Friends, thanks so much for joining us today and in this beautiful series that we've been engaged in this week. For those who are leaving us, we hope you'll rejoin us tomorrow as Sam concludes this week-long series, and at the same time, and gives us an opportunity, of course, to sit into Shabbat as well on Friday. Thanks to Adi Stein, and thanks to Valerie Taylor for sponsoring this week-long practice, and to our anonymous supporter today who is expressing appreciation for all the teachers at IJS. So we have a few minutes. Sam, I have a sense that we're eating a really, really rich chocolate cake here that just is the kind of thing we could easily spread it out over weeks and months, right? And given that we have so little time, I want to first of all just kind of see if I can recap very briefly this teaching for today, at least as I'm understanding, just to see if that's capturing it for people. And I know there were questions that did come in you want to address. So especially the text today, that the key from Sister Doherty, Rosemary Doherty, that the key to our discrimination, our discernment, is simple awareness of inner stirrings without analysis, which just to kind of, boil it down to the essence here, the Ikar, about cultivating attention to and cultivating awareness as the lens that enables the divine to be revealed to us, right? And it seems to me that part of what you're saying here, which is really important and really challenging, is that analysis and effort on our part to figure it out is actually getting in the way. And that what we really are trying to do is just make ourselves as clear as possible. Sometimes I use the metaphor of the bowl of water that's sloshing around and just settling the bowl so that the water is still. We can see really clearly. So the truth will emerge from that. And that instead of thinking we have to get it, we have to acquire it, we have to, as Moses puts it, cross the ocean, go up to the heavens. It's actually right there. So how's that?
Sounds great.
um,
and this is something we can check out in the laboratory of our experience, right?
right.
We can see what happens when we try to figure it out.
Mm-hmm.
In my experience, the mind kind of becomes more entrapped in its own kind of limitations, and kind of becomes like a snake chasing its tail, right? Just going around in circles, creating more confusion, more inner conflict, right? My heart kind of begins to contract, and the body feels tense and tight, but when I let go and I just bring bare attention without any analysis, and I listen deeply, and sometimes I do need to drop a question, but sometimes it's just, what's my heart saying right now? What's my body saying right now? What are my thoughts teaching me right now? The teaching arises of its own accord. Torah arises spontaneously and effortlessly, and the same with looking out in nature or listening to other people. Just dropping the need to figure anything out or achieve anything, and instead becoming receptive to the wisdom that's already there.
Yeah. Well, here's a question. I'm just going to work from the bottom up here. Is becoming aware of the remazim, the hints, and of Torah at every dimension of reality, in every moment, as you're saying, like in every moment of our experience, to get closer to God and divinity, part of the real spiritual work to get closer to God. And there's the Jewish spiritual term dveikut, cleaving, right? And I'm wondering also, just to tack that on to Teddy's question.
Yeah, great question. I have to speak here from two different perspectives, the absolute view and the relative view. Right? Because from an absolute view, God was never far away. We are divine. We are divine beings. Divinity is coursing through every cell of our being. And God is as close as your own breath, right? And your own consciousness. From the relative view, it seems like we're distant. We're confused. We make mistakes. We hurt ourselves and others through mindlessness and inattention, as well as greed, malice, ignorance. So a lot of our spiritual work is to, exactly as Sister Doherty said, right? On the one hand, to discern the ways in which the natural movements of our inner life are drawing us back toward the absolute reality of our nature, right? Of our true nature. And also to create enough inner light and vividness and spaciousness and equanimity to be able to observe clearly what's pulling you more, right, in a direction that points away from that realization and recognition.
Can you say that again, Sam? Because I think
Sure.
this is important. I mean, this question is coming up repeatedly about, okay, so even if all of this is true, how do we know, when what we are hearing, is authentically the voice of the divine, and how much is it like the Moshe Leib, story where he heard something he didn't want to hear in what somebody said, right?
Sure.
And that was kind of the proof. He said, it must be true because I don't want to hear that, right? It's true that I am able, I just don't want to, right?
Yeah.
But then Teddy throws in the example of Abraham at the Akedah, which of course could be a whole conversation about that, about, did he really, what was he really hearing clearly what was supposed to happen there, right? Or
Right.
was
Was
he
his
being led
receiver
astray?
broken? Right. Was his receiver
Was
broken?
the receiver broken, right? Right. The scanner was not working on the radio very well.
Yeah, exactly. Exactly.
There's a lot of static there.
Yeah, we'll talk about this a little bit more tomorrow in relation to how we engage with inherited Torah in the context of this practice. But, look, I mean, Doherty really suggests that we need to be, really kind of modest and humble here, and, what I would say is that, at least in my experience, I've become very attuned to what closes my heart, constricts my mind, creates tension in my body, and thereby restricts my capacity to share love unreservedly and unconditionally, right? Not as something that I cultivate, but as something that's a pure outflow of my true nature as love, right? And as connection. So it's really easy to see moment by moment what does that, right? I mean, just make a choice and then watch what happens in your body mind, right? Do something, think something, say something, right? In the context of your everyday life, and then observe what's happening internally. Does the heart become contracted? Does the body become tense? Does the mind become tight and narrow, right?
Well,
And is
sometimes
there a strong sense of division between you and others, right? Like I'm over here, they're over there, and over between shall meet, right? Or I'm good and they're bad, or I'm holy and they're not, or I'm developed and they're not, right? Or I'm right and they're wrong. My sense is that if that's where we end up, we're on the wrong path, right? And if we end up more open-hearted, more connected, more loving in a way that doesn't depend on external conditions, then we're on the right path. Like it was tremendously liberating for me in my spiritual life, in a concrete way in my marriage, when I decided my happiness does not depend on my wife, right? I actually have a wellspring of happiness inside of me that isn't dependent on external circumstances. And I liberated her from the weight of having to carry, right, the pressure of making me happy. And I also freed myself from feeling like I needed to somehow reach outside of myself to be a happy person, right? So that recognition, that insight that I had, because it happened in a moment of meditation where I was actually asking for guidance. And the answer I got was, your happiness does not depend on her, right? I've just watched how that's opened up space and connection in my marriage in a powerful way and made me a happier spouse, right? So we can watch these things in daily life and check out the truth of the message that we're getting, again, through these different k'nei midah, these different kinds of yardsticks and methods of discernment.
Thank you, Sam. Wish we could, well, it's always good to leave people wanting more. I'm having a sense that people would like a lot more, and we will find ways to explore that. But we'll look forward to tomorrow and chance to go even a little bit deeper with this practice. I will say, I, for one, am getting rid of my magic 8-ball, and I'm going to be drawn to this methodology more. Thank you, Sam.
Sure. Thanks. Send your 8-ball to me so I can play with my daughter.
I'll have to consult it to see. Perhaps so. Okay, everyone. Great to be with you. Many blessings. And thanks, Adi. Thank you, Valerie. Thank you all for being here. And looking forward to seeing you tomorrow as well. It's, by the way, it is I know for some people they got, for whatever reason, the notice went out for some people a little bit late today in terms of the link, but just know that the same Zoom link is available. The Zoom link is the same for every day. And of course, for any reason, if you are not able to be with us live, all the sessions are recorded and on the IJS YouTube channel. So if you miss any, you can go there, and or if you want to revisit any of the teachings or practices, please avail yourself of that as well.